I'm Kit Connor.
I'm Ray Mendoza, and we're here at Fanbase. Well, I wouldn't say I came up with the story. So how I was in the story. So I have a friend named Elliot Miller, played by Cosmo Jarvis, and when he got injured, some of the effects of the blast and just his recovery was his loss of memory of the incident. Um, Over the years, he's asked a lot of questions, and usually we do it in literary form, and we have there's a lot of people that were there, so I think it's never in a linear form for him. It's always been a single person's perspective, and so naturally he had a lot of questions. Got into the movie industry almost 15 years ago, and I learned that I just kind of started to learn about this new medium that I was very interested in. About maybe 5 years into it, the idea of maybe possibly creating this visual medium for Elliot started to kind of grow into my head. And so that's kind of where the seed was planted to make this film.
Well, again, in a similar way to Ray, with this project, it wasn't so much a task of like creating a character, because I was playing, a real person. So for me, it was a slightly different approach to anything I'd done before, because I hadn't ever really done that before. I hadn't been able to interview the guy that my character was based on. I hadn't been able to speak to many people who were at the event and knew the person I was playing. So that was a kind of new experience from my perspective as an actor, and it was made my life so much easier, because I could talk to Ray, and he would be able to give me a really good idea of his perception of my character, and also his perception of my character's events or actions in the events of the film. So it was pretty exciting in that regard as an actor, to be able to kind of not create a character but discover a character. Well, quite early on in the process, we as a cast used our kind of group chat as a way of sending loads of different media, lots of videos of SEALs and military guys in action. So we were immediately kind of trying to immerse ourselves in that world. Watched a lot of documentaries and things like that. But I think really the most formative process is in terms of getting that character and getting the kind of mindset of a SEAL was really the training process, was the boot camp, because that's where I think we all started to firstly form the brotherhood, form the relationship with each other, which is kind of the through line of the film, but was also just incredibly useful for us to start learning some of the vernacular that we might need to use, and start becoming really as proficient as we could be with the weapons, and just with the kind of way that these men moved. So that was, I think it was really helpful.
Yeah, I had a huge influence in the casting of this. I was just speaking in general about the casting, but I wanted a very youthful face on this. I think oftentimes, if you watch Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers, often traditionally, like we're old when we tell these stories, and I think one of the things I wanted to ensure was like it's the youth that typically fights wars. So that was kind of my first kind of parameter. And the next was more of an attitude. It was gonna be a really short, tight shooting schedule, fast, high tempo, long days, stress, and there's a lot we had to get done. So I think we didn't want people who needed to go back to their trailers. We wanted a kind of a team-oriented type people. So we had a list of cast actors that we interviewed, and we just started picking those with the right mindset. When you set those expectations right off the bat, you can get a good sense of the reaction. If you say, hey, it's going to be this difficult, the guy who's like, sign me up, you're like, cool. You get a good feeling that he's going to be an asset. And then the person who's a little hesitant, doesn't mean they're a bad actor, but wasn't going to be a traditional way of filming. And so we needed to be firing on all cylinders. In regards to Kit, playing Tommy was a new guy. And by new guy, meaning this is his first platoon, hadn't deployed before. Great machine gunner. One of the best I've seen. Later on, I went to be a training instructor, where I had to employ machine gunners and teach to them what I taught Kit. And nobody really could hold a candle to that guy, which made me proud, kind of thinking back to the incident. So, Tommy kind of represents this kind of innocence, this purity, like, no pun intended, but, these young, same boy it used to be. It's like a song that we use at the beginning. But it's just like, it's where we all start, and it's what it looks like when, that first experience of chaos, which does change the lens or your perspective on life and humanity, and seeing the worst, and then seeing the best of humanity kind of in the same space. And yeah, Kit was going to represent that.
Well, I think that it was a very kind of complicated mindset to portray, because there were a lot of factors, you know what I mean? Like just before that, even before the failed extraction, which, probably caused concussion and just kind of general confusion. Yeah, just shock and shell shock and things like that. And obviously earlier in the film, there was an incident with a grenade, and that had already kind of rocked him a little bit. So that was obviously the kind of physical factor, was that no matter how green he was, that would have an impact. And there's another character played by Taylor John Smith who is kind of equally shell-shocked and much less green. So that was an aspect. But there was a real thing of, this guy is on his first deployment, and I spoke to the guy that I was playing, and he told me that kind of before that they felt pretty invincible. They'd been out for a little while, and they'd had some close shaves, but it had never ever felt like they were actually gonna die, or that there was any kind of chance of that. And this was the first time where he ever felt that there was a risk that they might not come out. So I think that was one of the main things that was kind of going through my head. But I think also I had already by that point formed a good bond with the people that I was acting alongside, and seeing some of these guys in these situations and in these positions was again a fraction of what it would have felt like on the day, but it was definitely helpful for my performance, for sure. It was in many ways it did feel really like we were making a movie in a lot of ways, but it was a very unorthodox process in that regard. And as you say, it was very play-like in a lot of ways, especially the rehearsal process. And yeah, I mean, it taught me a lot. It kind of stretched us all as actors, I think, because you're not often required to stay in that mindset for 10-15 minute takes. And a lot of the time we'd be doing the same sort of 10-15 minute section for about 2-3 days, sometimes more. So that was a big challenge for us as actors, to be able to stay in it and keep it fresh and keep it feeling like it was real. But I do think that that's really what kind of makes our ensemble performance so much stronger, is the fact that there's so much kind of tension and energy, and it feels like it's happening,
Yeah, we made it very specifically. What I'm hoping people will leave with after watching this movie. It's just an understanding with everything that's going on in this world. There's lots of YouTube. It's hard to compete with that because that's real. That's about as real as we can get with some of the violence that we're watching. There's wars that are going on, and so I'm not trying to compete with that. What I'm trying to share is kind of what war really looks like, not from a thought process or emotional standpoint of having to process some of these things, and what it feels like to know that you may possibly die and watching your friends possibly die. So I'm just kind of really pulling the onion back on that. And if it creates a conversation piece, if you want to ask questions to better understand what we're going through, I think hopefully we'll all be more reluctant to send people off to war.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, again, from the perspective of the actor, this is kind of, a bit less important than Ray's perspective, but I think that the way that I always saw the film was just an incredibly authentic, kind of unbiased presenting of the facts and presenting of what happened. And I think the most kind of close to the ground portrayal of what modern warfare looks like and what these people have to go through, and the effects that it has on the people involved. So I hope that people watch it and feel feel moved and feel. I think that when I first spoke to Alex about this project, for example, he said that my character often kind of reminded him of, or he often kind of saw his son, and in terms of the age aspect. And I think that a lot of people might see this and think of their kids and imagine their kids in these kind of situations, and that would, I'm sure, make them feel a certain type of way, which is probably one of our goals. April 11th, all over the US.
Yeah, please watch.
Please watch.